This is HOA violation vault. The HOA made it personal, and I made it documented. My name is Aaron Cross. I manage a car rental lot in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I cannot afford to miss shifts. I take care of my disabled sibling full-time, which means every paycheck matters and every day runs on a tight schedule. When I moved into Riverbend Freezeline HOA Incorporated last September, I knew the neighborhood required a form for everything, and the form required another form, but I figured I could handle paperwork. I was wrong. The secretary, Barbara King, turned winter storm prep into a full contact war, and it started the day I put a bucket of ice melt salt by my front steps. Barbara stepped onto my walkway at 7 in the morning 2 days before Thanksgiving, already yelling. "You cannot leave that bucket there," she said, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "It violates the exterior appearance standards in Section 12.4. I was still holding my coffee, trying to process why anyone would care about a bucket of salt during freeze warnings. I said it is ice melt. For the steps. She crossed her arms and said, "I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized. If you wanted to store hazardous materials in plain sight, you should have requested a variance in writing 30 days in advance." I blinked at her. Hazardous materials. It is rock salt. She pulled out her phone, snapped 3 photos, and said, "You should have read the rules before you moved in, sweetheart." Then she walked away before I could even argue. I checked the HOA portal that night. There was no Section 12.4 about buckets. There was a vague line about storing yard equipment out of sight, but ice melt in a bucket during winter did not fit any reasonable reading. I sent a polite email to the board asking for clarification. Barbara replied within an hour with a 2-paragraph lecture about how seasonal items still count as visual clutter and how failure to comply would result in daily fines starting immediately. She copied the entire board. I moved the bucket inside my garage and thought that would be the end of it. It was not. 3 days later, I received a certified letter, violation notice, dated the day after Thanksgiving, claiming my driveway stakes were illegal signage. I had put up reflective stakes along the edges of my driveway so the plow guy would not tear up my grass. Every house on the block had them. I called the management company and got a voicemail. I called again the next morning and finally reached someone who said Barbara handles compliance, and you will need to work it out with her. I sent Barbara an email with photos showing identical stakes on 6 other driveways. She replied, "Those homeowners submitted prior approval. You did not. Submit your request in writing with a site plan, and we will review it at the next board meeting in February." February. It was December. The snow was already piling up. The certified letters started coming every other day. Each one accused me of something new. My snow shovel left leaning against the porch, my car parked 6 inches over the property line, my porch light left on past 10 at night. I work early shifts and I leave the light on so my sibling can see the steps when I get home. Barbara did not care. She flooded my mailbox with notices, each one threatening fines that stacked up faster than I could respond. The portable speaker she set up at the mailbox cluster became her signature move. She would stand there in the mornings, playing a pre-recorded announcement about compliance deadlines and violation penalties, loud enough that everyone collecting mail could hear. It was humiliating and deliberate. Then the weather turned. A massive storm system rolled in the second week of December, and the forecast called for 18 inches over 2 days with ice underneath. I have a delivery window for salt and sand, and if I miss it, stores sell out. I stocked up on everything I could carry, salt bags stacked in the garage, sand in buckets, extra shovels. I knew the lot would need me non-stop once the storm hit, and I could not afford to be trapped at home by driveway ice or a blocked road. I put my stakes back up. I cleared my walkway. I salted the steps. I did everything right. Barbara showed up the morning the snow started, earmuffs on, body camera clipped to her coat. She walked straight onto my property, grabbed one of my reflective stakes, and yanked it out of the ground. I was inside getting ready for work and I saw the whole thing through the front window. She pulled out 4 stakes, tossed them into the snow pile at the curb, and then took photos of the empty holes like I had removed them myself. I ran outside. "What are you doing?" She turned and said, "Removing illegal signage per section 9.2. I said, "Those are driveway markers. Everyone has them." She said, "I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized. You were warned. Now you are in violation of emergency snow removal standards because your driveway edges are not clearly marked." She handed me a new notice, turned, and walked away. I stood there in the falling snow, holding a violation notice for not having the stakes she had just removed. That was when I stopped arguing and started collecting, because the end game was already set. I went back inside, pulled up my security camera footage, and watched the whole thing in high definition. Timestamped. Barbara King, board secretary, pulling up stakes on private property and then filing a violation for the exact problem she caused. I saved 3 copies. I uploaded one to the cloud. I burned another to a thumb drive. I printed stills and put them in a tabbed binder I kept tucked under one arm wherever I went. I did not tell anyone yet. I needed more. The storm hit hard that night. 18 inches turned into 22. The plows did not come through until noon the next day, and when they did, they shoved a 3-foot wall of packed snow and ice across every driveway apron. I was already at the lot, helping customers dig out rental cars when my phone started buzzing. Text from my sibling. "Barbara at the door. Says the driveway is a hazard." I called home. My sibling answered, voice shaking. "She is saying we have 24 hours to clear the apron, or she will fine us $200 a day." I said, "The plow just came through an hour ago." She said, "Compliance does not pause for weather." I told my sibling to shut the door and not answer again. Then I called my neighbor Marcus, who sits on a different committee and knows the backstory. He said, "She is doing this to 4 people on the block. All of you filed complaints about her last month. This is retaliation." I got home that night and cleared the driveway in the dark, headlamp on, fingers numb. The apron took an hour because the plow had packed it into solid ice chunks. I salted everything. I took photos with timestamps. I sent them to the portal with a polite note confirming compliance. Barbara replied at 6 the next morning. "Your salt application exceeds the environmental guidelines in section 14.1. Remove the excess immediately." I looked up section 14.1. It was about fertilizer runoff in spring. Nothing about winter salt. I sent back a screenshot of the section with the text highlighted. She did not reply. She just sent another certified letter threatening a hearing. The hearing notice came 3 days before Christmas. Mandatory compliance review scheduled for the 27th at the clubhouse. Failure to appear would result in automatic fines and a lien filing. I knew what this was. Barbara was trying to bury me in process during the holidays when nobody else was paying attention. I called Marcus again. He said, "You need to show up with everything. Bring your evidence, bring witnesses, bring a recorder if you can." She is going to try to ram this through with just her and one other board member. I said, "What about the other violations? The ones she filed against the other neighbors?" He said, "2 of them paid the fines just to make it stop. 1 moved out. You are the last one." That was when the escalation really started. Barbara posted in the neighborhood group chat that I was creating a hazard during the storm by refusing to follow snow removal protocols. She included photos of my driveway, my front steps, my mailbox, all taken from the street with Zoom. She wrote 3 paragraphs about how non-compliant residents put everyone at risk, and how the board had tried to work with me, but I refused to cooperate. 30 people saw it before I even woke up. My phone was full of messages. Some people defended me. Most stayed quiet. 2 people replied with thumbs-up emojis under Barbara's post. The next day, she escalated again. I received a new letter. This one was not about snow. It was a proposal to ban me from all neighborhood amenities, including the mailbox cluster and the guest parking area, as punishment for repeated non-compliance. It cited 6 violations, half of which I had already resolved, and the other half that were invented. The letter said the board would vote on the ban at the next meeting unless I withdrew my appeal and paid all outstanding fines. The fines totaled $1,400. I did not have $1,400. I had rent, utilities, medical costs for my sibling, and a paycheck that barely covered it all. If you are enjoying this HOA nightmare, hit the like button and subscribe, because I have more stories about neighborhood tyrants who got exactly what they deserved. I called the management company again. This time I got through to a supervisor named Jessica. I explained everything: the bucket, the stakes, the letters, the chat post, the ban proposal. She listened and then said, "I need to see your evidence." I said, "I have video." She said, "Send it." I uploaded the camera footage showing Barbara pulling the stakes, the timestamps on the violation notices, and the screenshots of the portal showing the rules she claimed I violated did not exist. Jessica said she would review it and get back to me within 48 hours. I said, "The hearing is in 4 days." She said, "I know. I will do what I can." I spent Christmas Day digging out my car after another 6 inches fell overnight. The lot needed me. The storm had created a backlog of customers, and we were running double shifts just to keep up. I got home after dark on the 26th, exhausted, and found another certified letter wedged into my door. This one was not from Barbara. It was from a towing company. Authorization to remove 1 vehicle from the property at Riverbend Freeze Line HOA Incorporated for non-compliance with emergency parking protocols. My car was the only one listed. The letter was dated that morning, which meant Barbara had filed it while I was at work. I looked outside. My car was parked in my own driveway, fully cleared, properly salted. There was no violation. She was just trying to tow it anyway. I called the towing company. The operator who answered said they had received the authorization from the HOA and would be dispatching a truck within 24 hours. I said, "The car is on private property and there is no violation." He said, "We enforce HOA requests. If you have a dispute, you need to take it up with them." I said, "I am taking it up with them tomorrow at the hearing." He paused. Then he said, "What hearing?" I explained. He said, "Hold on. I heard papers shuffling." Then he said, "We did not receive any hearing notice." The authorization says the violation is final. I felt my chest tighten. Barbara had filed the tow request without telling the company there was an active dispute. She was trying to have my car removed before I could even defend myself. I said, "I have proof that the violations are false." He said, "You will need to send that to us directly." I got his email and sent him everything: the footage, the timestamps, the screenshots, the photos. He said he would hold the tow pending review. I said, "How long?" He said, 72 hours max. I said, "The hearing is tomorrow." He said, "Then you better win." I did not sleep that night. I went through the binder, double-checking every document, every date, every photo. I printed 3 extra copies of the camera footage stills and highlighted the timestamps in yellow. I wrote a timeline on a single sheet of paper, clean and simple, showing every violation notice next to the date Barbara filed it and the proof that it was false. I put the car key fob in my coat pocket, clenched in my fist, just in case I needed to move the car fast. The morning of the 27th, I got to the clubhouse 15 minutes early. The building was cold and empty. The heat was barely on. I sat up at the table, binder in front of me, extra copies stacked next to it. Marcus showed up a few minutes later. He said Barbara's bringing 2 other board members. They are going to try to vote you down before you even present. I said, "Can they do that?" He said, "Technically no, but she will try." I opened the binder to the first page and waited. Barbara walked in exactly on time, flanked by two older men I recognized from the annual meeting. She did not look at me. She sat down at the head of the table, put her coat on the back of the chair, and placed a tablet in front of her. One of the men, a guy named Ron, said, "Let us keep this brief. Mr. Cross, you are here because you have repeatedly violated community standards and refused to comply with correction notices. We are prepared to impose fines and move forward with enforcement, unless you can provide a compelling reason not to." I said, "I can. I have proof that every violation filed against me is false." Ron said, "We have reviewed the file. The evidence is clear." I said, "Have you seen the camera footage?" He blinked. "What footage?" Barbara cut in fast. "There is no relevant footage. Mr. Cross has been non-compliant since day one, and this hearing is a formality." I said, "It is not a formality. I have video showing you pulling my driveway stakes and then filing a violation for the stakes being missing." The room went quiet. Ron looked at Barbara. She said, "That is a lie." I said, "It is time-stamped." She said, "I do not care what you claim. You were in violation." I opened the binder, pulled out the stills, and slid them across the table. Barbara stared at them. Her face went red. Ron picked up the stills. He studied them. Then he looked at Barbara and said, "When were these taken?" I said, "December 14th at 8:42 in the morning. You can see the timestamp in the corner." Ron said, "Barbara, did you remove his stakes?" She said, "I was enforcing the rules." Ron said, "By removing property and then citing him for not having it?" She did not answer. The other board member, a woman named Diane, leaned forward and said, "Do you have more?" I said, "I have everything." I turned to the next tab and showed them the violation for the salt bucket, with screenshots proving Section 12.4 did not exist. I showed them the letter threatening a ban, filed the same day I submitted my appeal. I showed them the tow authorization filed without notifying the towing company about the hearing. Diane said, "This is retaliation." Ron said, "We need to pause this and review the file independently." Barbara stood up. She said, "I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized. If we let people ignore the rules, we lose control." Diane said, "Barbara, sit down." Barbara did not sit. She said, "He has been a problem from day one. He does not respect the process." Ron said, "The process includes accurate enforcement. This is not accurate." Barbara grabbed her tablet and said, "I am not going to sit here and be accused of misconduct by someone who could not be bothered to submit a simple variance request." Then she walked out. The room sat in silence for a solid 10 seconds. Ron finally said, "This hearing is suspended. We need to bring in the management company and do a full audit." I said, "What about the tow?" He said, "We will send a cancellation to the company today." I said, "What about the fines?" Diane said, "If the violations are invalid, the fines are invalid. We will issue a written correction within a week." I said, "And the ban proposal?" Ron said, "Dead. Not happening." I walked out of that room with the binder still tucked under my arm and the weight off my chest for the first time in 2 months. Marcus caught up with me in the parking lot. He said, "You did it." I said, "Barely." He said, "No, you crushed her. She is done." He was right. The audit happened fast. Jessica, the management company supervisor, came out personally and spent 3 days going through the compliance files. She found 14 violations filed by Barbara in the past 6 months, 9 of which had no supporting documentation, and 3 of which were filed after the supposed violation date. She found evidence that Barbara had used her access to the portal to delay appeal submissions from 4 different homeowners, making it look like they missed deadlines when they had filed on time. She found the tow authorization and confirmed that Barbara had checked a box claiming there was no active dispute when the hearing was already scheduled. Jessica called me on January 3rd and said, "We are terminating the HOA contract with the current board and requiring a full election." Barbara King is suspended from all compliance duties effective immediately. The election happened in February. Barbara did not run. She did not even show up. A new board was voted in, including Marcus, and the first thing they did was rewrite the compliance process. No more certified letter floods. No more retroactive violations. No more single-person enforcement authority. Every violation now required a second review before fines were issued. It was not perfect, but it was better. The towing company called me a week later. The operator who had listened carefully when I explained everything asked to meet in person. I drove over to the yard. He was standing outside the office, coat open, arms crossed. He said, "We reviewed your file and the footage you sent. We are refunding the authorization fee to the HOA, and we are canceling the association contract. Barbara King lied to us about the dispute status, and we do not work with clients who misrepresent enforcement." He handed me a printout showing a refund of fees that hit the ledger like a slap. I said thank you. He said, "You saved us a lawsuit. We owe you." The real payoff came at the March meeting. The new board required Barbara to attend and issue a formal apology on the record in front of the entire room. She showed up late, no body camera, no earmuffs, just a plain coat and a tight expression. The room was packed. 30 people, maybe more. Marcus stood up and read the audit summary aloud. Every false violation, every delayed appeal, every piece of evidence showing she had weaponized the process. Then he said, "Barbara King, the board requires you to address the homeowners you targeted." She stood. Her voice was flat. She said, "I apologize for any confusion regarding compliance procedures. I acted in what I believed was the best interest of the community." Marcus said, "That is not sufficient. Apologize for the false violations." She paused. Then she said, "I apologize for filing inaccurate notices." The room was silent. Someone in the back coughed. Marcus said, "Thank you. You are dismissed." She walked out without looking at anyone. I never saw her at another meeting. Someone told me she moved 3 months later. I do not know if that is true. I do not care. The twist that broke everything open came when Marcus pulled the neighborhood map during the audit. He showed it to me over coffee in his kitchen. The lot boundaries were marked in bright colors, each one labeled with the rule zones. My property was highlighted in yellow. Marcus pointed to the notation and said, "Your lot is exempt from decorative storage restrictions under the original plat. It was zoned mixed use when the HOA was formed, and the rules never applied." Barbara knew that. She had access to the full map the entire time. I stared at the screen. I said, "So the bucket, the stakes, all of it." Marcus said, "None of it was ever a violation. She targeted you because you filed a complaint about her shutting down the portal during the November update. This was revenge from day one." I went home that night and looked at the calendar. 2 months of stress. 2 months of certified letters and sleepless nights and the fear that I would lose my car or my home or my ability to take care of my sibling. All because Barbara King could not handle being questioned. I thought about the timestamp on the camera footage, the moment she bent down and pulled the first stake, the moment she sealed her own fate. I smiled. The HOA compliance process was audited and cleaned up by April. The new board implemented a formal review system with mandatory documentation, witness requirements, and an independent appeals process through the management company. Barbara's old files were sealed and flagged. 3 homeowners who had paid fines under her enforcement received refunds. One of them sent me a thank you card. It said, "You stood up when the rest of us gave in." That meant something. The final showdown happened at the shared mailbox cluster, where everyone was shoveling and watching on a bright Saturday morning in early March. I was clearing the pathway around the boxes when Barbara pulled up in her car. She got out, walked straight toward me, and said, "You ruined my reputation." I stopped shoveling. I looked at her. I said, "No. You ruined your reputation when you pulled my stakes and then lied about it." She said I was doing my job. I said, "Your job was not to fabricate violations and terrorize people." She stepped closer, voice rising. She said, "You should have read the rules before you moved in, sweetheart." I pulled the tab binder out from under my arm and held it between us. I said I did read the rules, every single one, and then I read the map that proves you knew my lot was exempt the whole time. Her face went white. She started yelling, loud enough that everyone stopped what they were doing. She said, "You think you won? You think this is over?" I did not raise my voice. I said, "It is over. You were forced to apologize on the record in front of the room. The towing company canceled your contract. The management company refunded fees that hit the ledger like a slap. You lost." She screamed, "I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized." I said, "No. You are the reason we needed an audit." Then I turned and walked back to my driveway. She stood there, shaking, while 10 people watched in silence. Someone started clapping, then someone else. By the time I reached my front steps, half the block was clapping. Barbara got in her car and drove away. I never spoke to her again. The spring thaw came in April, and the stakes stayed up without a single letter. The bucket sat by my front steps all season. Nobody said a word. The new board sent a newsletter thanking residents for participating in the election and promised transparency moving forward. I kept the binder in my car, just in case. I did not need it again. My sibling asked me one night if it was worth it. All the stress, all the fighting, all the hours spent gathering proof. I thought about it. Then I said yes, because if I had not fought, Barbara would still be doing it to someone else. The audit proved that. 9 false violations in 6 months. 4 people targeted. 1 person who moved out just to escape her. I did not fight for me. I fought so the next person would not have to. The lot is still busy. I still work early shifts. I still take care of my sibling. The difference is I do not come home to certified letters anymore. I do not check the mailbox with my stomach in knots. I do not worry that my car will be gone when I get back from work. I park in my driveway, walk up the salted steps, and unlock the door without looking over my shoulder. That is what winning looks like. Not revenge, not drama, just peace. The neighborhood is quieter now. The portable speaker disappeared from the mailbox cluster. The group chat is boring again. People complain about potholes and trash pickup, normal stuff. Nobody mentions Barbara. It is like she was never here. Maybe that is the real karma. You spend so much energy trying to control everyone, and in the end, you are the one who gets erased. I saw Marcus last week. He said the new compliance officer is retiring and they need someone to take over. He asked if I was interested. I laughed. I said absolutely not. He said, "Fair. But you would be good at it." I said, "I would be fair at it. There is a difference." He said, "That is what we need." I told him I would think about it. I have not decided yet. Part of me wants to walk away and let someone else deal with the forms and the deadlines and the angry emails. Part of me wants to make sure nobody else goes through what I did. I do not know which part will win. I guess I will find out. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.